I don't think we
of,
even notice it anymore. It's so commonplace that when anything goes wrong, we're just a whiny society. We're the richest place that I can imagine to live in. Rich when I say everything, not just money. Rich in freedom, rich in faith, rich in wisdom and joy and potential and wealth and health and all that good stuff. We're so rich. But all we do is whine and complain constantly. If you do any social media, it's just full of people complaining and whining. And us as Christians should be the opposite of that. With the fact that we've been redeemed, been given eternal life, we've been given the presence of God that lives inside of us and forgiveness for all of our sins. We have a blank slate. Every morning is new. We should be so freaking happy and so thankful and so joyous. And we just moan and complain. And we complain in the church, we complain outside the church. It's just wrong. And so I think we just feel like it's our freedom to say stuff, whatever we want, and we are free to do that, but we're free to do it with a way that honors God.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Built in Faith podcast. I am your host, David Hemm, and today we have a special guest in Robert Hunt. Robert, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Well, Robert, I am excited to have you on. Normally, I would introduce people and give them kind of a, hey, this is what they do. But your hands are in a lot of things. So I think it might be better for you to help explain to everybody kind of what it is that you're doing and kind of where all your hands are. And then we'll kind of go from there.
Well, that's awesome. What I do for a living is I run peer groups for CEOs and business owners here in DFW. That's my main bread and butter thing. I've been doing it since 2013. I love it. It is allowing me to live out my personal purpose through my job. And in support of them in the goals that they want to achieve as a member of our group, I provide executive coaching. I do leadership development with their teams. We do strategic planning sessions and retreats. And then I get invited to do keynote speaking. And I've had more and more opportunities to do workshops, mostly with my clients. But on a regular basis, I get invited to other companies that aren't my clients to go do things. And I love doing that, to meet new groups and see if I can continue to influence more people. So the cool part about my life is my beautiful wife, Kathy. I've been married 25 years. I love her so much. She's awesome. I have two adult children. Lauren is 32, married to Dylan in Austin, Texas, and James is 22. Oh, Lauren's 33. She'd probably care that I got that wrong. James is 22, and he still lives at home with us here in Frisco as he's finishing up his college at UT Dallas, and he is awesome too.
That's awesome, man. Well, I am excited to dig in a little bit to that. But before we get there, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, just to kind of understand your background a little more. I'd love to hear your testimony if that's something that you're willing to share,
Yeah,
and just kind of,
absolutely.
well, we'll walk that path. So I'll let you kind of guide us there.
I grew up in the church, playing a good Christian since I was a little boy. Gave my heart to Jesus at 5 years old. Read the little book at church about the red and black pages. And you don't want to go to hell, do you? No, I don't want to go to hell. And grew up in the church, but I really didn't have a relationship with Christ all the way through camp experiences. And I had a great church that I was a part of. Had plenty of opportunities to surrender my will to the Lord, but I didn't take it that seriously until I was 31 years old. Went to a Promise Keepers conference in Anaheim, California. And it was that day that I just realized everyone's all hyped up about Jesus. What am I doing wrong here? I'm not experiencing this, because I kept trying to keep one foot in my world of rebelling against God and doing things my way, and another foot in the church world, and neither one of them were that serious. So that day I surrendered my heart to the Lord completely, and I just said, hey, I want to know what it's like to really enjoy a relationship with God, not just do church, but really know Him. And it was so cool. It was such an amazing moment. And from that time on, I really grew in my faith. I couldn't read the Bible enough. I wanted to read the Bible. It wasn't an obligation. I liked talking with God, and I heard Him. His Spirit of God was teaching me and guiding me and convicting me and making it so much richer in this relationship with Him. And that's when my faith became real. I was willing to have one version of me everywhere. I used to worry that what happens if the guys I take to strip clubs meet the guys I go to Sunday school with? This is not a good world. They're in the same city. This could not work out good.
Yep.
And so just removing that and having one version of me with so much more peace. I was more effective. I felt like I was having more joy in my life because of it. And that was a turning point.
And that's great. It's funny. So I don't think you know this about me, but I'm originally from California, and my dad was actually huge in the Promise Keepers. He did it for a long time, so
Oh,
it's very possible that you guys were probably at that conference together.
awesome. Awesome. I was a huge fan of Promise Keepers in its glory days. It was phenomenal. And I brought my brother the next year, who was a cocaine addict, and brought him. He was high, and we spent a night at a hotel so he couldn't get high back at home when I dropped him off. And so we hung out, and the next day he surrendered his life to the Lord in '95, and took him away from drugs that night, that day. He stopped taking drugs that day. It was a
Wow.
miracle, and he's been quite a testimony since then.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. So I mean, so you grew up in the church. You were kind of, we'll call it lukewarm. Growing up, had this moment here with Promise Keepers, and your life changed. So 31, you're basically beginning into the launch of your career. So how did that kind of shape and mold the direction that you were going in the workspace?
It was an interesting year. So in 1994, I'd been married 10 years. And when I surrendered my heart to the Lord in May of that year, I was so excited about my faith. Couldn't stop talking about it. Really excited. My wife at the time wasn't that into it, but of course, neither had I been for the first 9 years of our marriage. And so that 10-year anniversary came up, and I had a surprise recommitment of our vows at the church we got married in with the people from our wedding. And I surprised her, and she was crying, and it was a very touching moment. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to really build this amazing marriage, and all centered around Christ. And she wasn't wanting the same thing as I was at that moment. So 2 months later, she served me divorce papers at my office, and I came home from work, and the house was empty, and she and my 2-year-old daughter were gone. And I remember standing in the kitchen that night, and I said to the Lord, wow, this is the thanks I get for surrendering my life to you. And his spirit clearly said, no, I was getting you ready for tonight. And he carried me through the worst days of my life. I went through a bankruptcy. I spent a fortune trying to get at least some time with my daughter. The money you pay is based on how much time you have with your kids. So she wanted to have as much time as she could have. So I'd pay as much as I could, and not, I don't think she was evil to keep me from my daughter, but I think she was looking at the math of it. But anyway, so I went through a bankruptcy. I had to start over. I lost all my friends, the church friends that I had grown up with. My divorce was super public. It was in the paper, what was going on with my ex-wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, and it was just a big deal. So through that, though, I learned to trust in God. Through that, I saw his hand of provision, his hand of comfort. And I also realized that this big quest I had to be an amazing businessman wasn't that cool anymore. I compared to what I wanted to do was to protect my daughter. And it looked, I guess, my marriage was not going to ever come back. I had to at least create a new world for her. And so I didn't go to work for like 3 months. I was like, I can't do it, guys. And God was so kind. He made my sales go through the roof, and I wasn't even showing up. I did $48 million in sales that year. And
Wow.
it was just the Lord's hand, which is kind of a bummer because that's how they base your child support payments, on how much money you're making. So, but it was a great way for God to provide for my ex-wife. I just learned, don't get your panties in a wad when things don't go your way. God has a plan that you just can't get your head around. And even if he told you, you wouldn't get it. And so I just learned to go, okay, what do you want to do next? And trust, because he is good and he is faithful. And he took care of us in ways that I could tell you for days, all the stories of God's provision, leading up to a day where later on I got married to Kathy, who is my wife, and we've been married 25 years now, have a son of our own. And God has given me such a rich life, despite that really, really hard.
Yeah, man. I mean, what a true testament of the Lord carrying you. it's in those moments, right, that we draw closest to the Lord. Like the Israelites, it's easy for us to drift when things are going well,
Oh
but
yeah. Oh yeah.
sometimes it takes something difficult to bring us back on our knees.
Yeah, my mom
So
always said that the view from the top of the mountain is beautiful, but the fruit grows in the valley. And when I'm in my hardest times in the ditch, that's when I go, okay, okay, all right, I get it. And I
yeah,
grow and I learn. But it's like working out. Nobody likes, I mean, when you're working out, you're sweating, it hurts, and it's, why do you do that? Well, because it's, you want the result. And I think
hmm
working out our faith it can be painful, but it's what I want. I want to, when you've really experienced what it's like to know God intimately, you want more and more of that. And the pain, the suffering, the frustration, bring it on, bring it on. That's okay,
yeah.
because in comparison to the results, man, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, it's the idea that the Bible talks about, a refiner's fire, right? This putting gold into a fire, superheating it so everything impure, it just begins to burn away, and all
Yeah,
that's left is pure gold. But that process is not an enjoyable one, but it is
no,
for our good and His glory. So that's great, Robert. Well, I mean, it's great to see how the Lord carried you through that, and that you've been able to be married to your wife for 25 years. That's a wonderful testament to, and just what a chapter change, even
yeah,
through
it's
that.
it's interesting. We got married, and then like 3 months later, 2 months later, I'm taking a tour of Wycliffe Bible translators in Santa Ana. And God spoke to me for the only one time in my entire life that I heard that voice of God. And He said, "You need to work at Wycliffe Bible Translators." And I was freaking out. And I'm telling this guy who I had just recently met, "Hey, God just told me I have to work here." And he's like, "Really? Right on." So we began the whole process, and they're like, "No, we can't take you. You're divorced." And I was like, well, that was like 4 years ago. And, if you're worried about raising money, I've been volunteering at my church for the last 4 years, and I've grown quite a relationship with them and the people there. I can get all the money I need. No. I'm like, well, why is God telling me to work here and you're shutting me down? And I petitioned it. I had people write letters for me and all this stuff, and nothing. And so we were like, okay, well, maybe God just wants us to be ready, and maybe it's next year. Maybe He didn't say when. He just said you need to work here. So we lived ready for Wycliffe to call us at any minute. We'd go on mission trips every year. We dove into the world of missions, and we were always supporting the missions and supporting Wycliffe, and they're like stiff arming me forever, and I couldn't figure it out. And now it's 30 years later, 25 years later. Well, 25 years later, and they haven't called yet. And so I don't know if they'll call me in the next year or so or in the future and go, hey, okay, we're ready for you. He did not say that. When? So I'm just going to live available for what God wants to do next. But it could have also been one of those Abraham moments where God says, hey, sacrifice your son. And He just wanted to see if you're willing to do it. And we were willing. My beautiful wife, who I just married, it's like, you're called by God to go into ministry and where you're going to quit your high paying job to do this. Yeah. And she was like, okay. And she was totally supportive. That's the wife I have. She's just awesome like that. So
What a
someday I may
gift.
get a call from Wycliffe. We'll just see where it goes.
Well, hey, what a gift. It is, he who finds a wife finds a good thing. So
Absolutely. She is a good
it's
thing.
incredible to have that kind of support in your home. Well, great, brother. Well, why don't you dive us into a little bit more about what you're currently doing? We touched on kind of a bit here at the beginning, but I know you've written a book. You are an avid podcaster, and you run this peer networking group. So, kind of, how do these all? But part of it is, how do these all intertwine, and,
Yeah,
and
it's a
what is
great
it?
question. They
What are
absolutely
we
do.
doing? hmm
So they all come together under the banner of accountability. And it's really weird because I was probably the least accountable person I've known most of my life. I was very lazy. That was my general mode. When I was a young boy, I was lazy. And man, God just had to beat it out of me. It was a long journey of disappointing myself and the world around me until I finally realized, okay, look, I gotta own. No one's gonna do it for me. And so I was never a big fan of accountability. But as I started doing these peer groups, and throughout my whole career, as I watched business owners make really bad decisions in a void, when we don't have someone that is challenging us or asking questions or close enough to know what the heck is really going on, we make really bad decisions as business owners. And I watch business owners I work for selfishly treat people really horribly, make really selfish decisions, be irresponsible. And I was frustrated as my career as a marketing director. That was most of my career, sales and marketing. And I remember just watching these people who were just such bad behavior, and yet they were in charge, and they were just building this empire of badness, and the lack of emotional intelligence and all these things. So I kept saying, someday I'm gonna show people how to do it right. And yet I never was in a place to be the CEO or president of a company. And frankly, I wasn't really equipped to do that, but I just saw that it wasn't being done right. Well, when I moved to Texas in 2010, I met a guy who was running peer groups and he was looking for foreign group leaders. And so I thought, well, that's my personal purpose in life. I could live out my purpose through my job. I'm going to go do that. And so I did. And so over the years of watching business owners make really bad decisions, and many of them make really great decisions, I have seen the power of accountability. And in my own life, my beautiful wife, Kathy, and I, we got to a place in our lives where we were playing the victim role and we weren't aware of it. But in 2019, God really got our attention. And that's what the book's basically about, is Salem and I, who's the co-author, sharing stories and teaching the principles of accountability, because I don't think people get it anymore. So I'm on this whole quest to be the accountability guy. That's my whole thing, is I want people to think of me when they think of the world of accountability. My business is accountability. Our book is about accountability. I believe that we as Christ followers are absolutely to be accountable. And yet we play the victim, and we're not a victim. We're victorious through Christ, but we play the role of a victim. And many times we're not even aware of it, but it holds us back from God being able to use us, because we're acting like spoiled children who whine about things instead of grateful, thankful people who've been redeemed. And so I want everyone to understand the principles of accountability, and I want those of us who are Christ followers to recognize that we're accountable for the lives we live at work. Not just at church, but at work. And the decisions we make 6 days a week. Most people I know work at least 5 days a week, maybe more. Certainly if you're a business owner, you're probably pushing 6 days a week.
Yep.
But you're accountable to God for the life he's given you. You will be held accountable by him. He's the only person in the world that can hold anyone accountable. Everyone else, it doesn't work. But for God, he will hold us accountable, and I want us to take that seriously.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And you're right. You're touching on a topic that there's a little bit of a difficulty there. Even like I would say generationally, right? There's a little bit of that's continuing to flourish as younger generations are moving up and kind of coming out of this, Disney-fied culture for a time, that it's brought a lot of bad habits, a lot of bad ideas into the workplace too.
I don't think we even notice it anymore. It's so commonplace that when anything goes wrong, we're just a whiny society. We're the richest place that I can imagine to live in. Rich when I say everything, not just money. Rich in freedom, rich in faith, rich in wisdom and joy and potential and wealth and health and all that good stuff. We're so rich. But all we do is whine and complain constantly. If you do any social media, it's just full of people complaining and whining. And us as Christians should be the opposite of that. With the fact that we've been redeemed, we've been given eternal life, we've been given the presence of God that lives inside of us and forgiveness for all of our sins. We have a blank slate. Every morning is new. We should be so freaking happy and so thankful and so joyous. And we just moan and complain. And we complain in the church. We complain outside the church. It's just wrong. And so I think we just feel like it's our freedom to say stuff, whatever we want. And we are free to do that. But we're free to do it with a way that honors God. That's what he came to give us freedom for, in a way that serves and represents him. And the way that I don't see that, the way that I can help you see this better is when people don't recognize that they're not being accountable. If the first thing you do when a problem manifests itself in front of you is to blame, you're not being accountable. If you make an excuse for why it happened, you're not being accountable. If you say, well, I can't do anything about it, that's not being accountable. And if you just wait and hope that somehow it'll fix itself and get better, that is not accountable. All those things hold you back as a victim. And maybe you've been victimized. Maybe you, like me, you went through a horrible divorce and it was not your fault. Hey, we all contribute to every part of everything. There's nothing I was not a part of. I lived in that marriage. I could have protected my wife better. I could have built a marriage where we sought after Christ so aggressively there wasn't room for the enemy to get a foothold. So we all take ownership in everything. But when you may have been victimized in something, it doesn't mean you have to stay a victim. It means that just like you've been a victim of sin and the plot of the enemy, Christ came and redeemed us and set us free from that. So we're not victims anymore. We're victorious, and we need to act like that instead of blaming and making excuses and saying we can't, or just sitting around waiting for someone else to do it. We need to own it and be the leaders and be the people out front who are representing Christ well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, right, when I think of the term victim, to put it in more biblical language, right, that's just someone who sinned against you, right? And as a Christian, like we have a guide to how we deal with things when someone sinned against us. And we don't live in bitterness. We don't live in a woe is me mentality.
We shouldn't.
We shouldn't. We forgive because Christ has forgiven us, and he's given us so much that we are to be thankful. We're a thankful people, and our joy is not dependent upon circumstances. It's rooted in a person. So we can look forward in hope and in joy regardless of the situation that's going around us. So that's great, man. That's a great and needed topic to be able to continue to teach and talk to people about.
Yeah, I recently went to a conference in Dallas that was put on by Coke Consolidated, a very, very bold in their faith organization. And they had their lawyers there talking about how you have the right to talk about your faith at work. And I think we've self-imposed as a people that we can't talk about God at work. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. I mean, if this guy can talk about all the babes he's bagged in the last couple of weeks, and this guy can talk about how hammered he got last night, and she can talk about how she's stealing from her boyfriend. If we can have all these conversations, why can't we talk about our love for God? And it's self-imposed and it's wrong. And the reason it's self-imposed is people have done it so poorly for so long, where Christians have come to work and condemned everyone to hell and spent all their time judging and yelling at everybody instead of speaking love first and then truth when they're open to it. Christ came and he showed the same example with the woman at the well. He accepted her. He recognized her. He gave her significance by even talking to her. And then he spoke of truth. And so it starts with love. Jesus says they'll know us by our love. And so if we can love people well, then you have the opportunity to see God moving inside their lives, because you've removed all the junk and hurt that people have is removed by love. Love casts out fear. People live in fear so much. If we can love them well, it removes the fear long enough for them to hear the voice of God, and God can call them. And then you can say, well, the truth is God's calling you. You need to choose, take his free gift of salvation. But until we get the love part down right, we need to chill on everything else.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of, right, back to the accountability thing. There's a bit of fear that comes to play in this, of just concerned about what people think and what they'll think of us. And, we haven't been the best representation of Christ in our workplace either. So there's a little bit of, I don't want to be hypocritical by being, speaking to things, because I haven't probably been the best, Christ follower in my workplace as I could.
Yeah, but you haven't been the best employer either. You've lit people up for no reason. You've been in a bad mood. You made a rash decision. You've emotionally decided we're going to do here or there. You as a leader, you've not been perfect in your leadership, but you don't stop being a leader. Mm-hmm. So what's the reason we self-impose ourselves in our faith? Let's say you've been a total jerkweed to everybody at work for the longest time, and then you realize, wait, this isn't how I'm supposed to roll. You can come in and admit to the whole team, I've been acting like a jerk. And I was really talking to the Lord, and he was convicting me of my behavior, and I need to apologize to everybody here. I got a long road to go, but I want to let you know I'm going to work on it. And I just apologize. And you reset the clock. Yeah. Because every time a leader makes a bad decision, he doesn't quit and sell the company.
Yeah.
We'd have no companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're absolutely right. Like, right. And not only does that allow you and give you a spot to be able to speak to it, but you're actually showing more Christ-likeness in the fact that you see your own sinfulness and you're admitting to where you've fallen short, right? We're not pretending like we're perfect people. The difference is we know what to do when we realize that we haven't been perfect people.
Yeah. Which is every day.
So we have a lot of opportunity.
We do have a lot of opportunity. I think that's the beauty of accountability. Accountability to most people seems like a punitive word. I'm going to hold you accountable. But there's freedom in accountability. There's joy. There's power. When you take accountability for everything in your life is when you gain the opportunity to change anything in your life. And if everything that happens to you, you're a victim, you're helpless. But when you say, wait, this is mine, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to own this? You now take the reins and decide, I'm going to do this. And it may still be really hard and it may still suck. But at the end of the day, you're driving it. You're making the decision. You're taking action. You're not being a victim, blaming someone or making excuses for why it happened or saying you can't do anything about it. And that's the story that Kathy and I have in the book that we outlined. In 2019, we were $90,000 in debt. And it was painful. And I remember every year, Kathy would say stuff like, when is God going to bless your business? And I, in my own mind, would go, well, I am already blessed. I have a beautiful wife who loves me. I have great clients. We're making good money. We're just not making the money that we could do to get us out of the pit we created by the frivolous life that we lived for so long. And so God wasn't obliged to clean up my mess. I could just hear him going, bless you. What are you talking about? I gave you millions of dollars. What'd you do with it all? I'm not going to give you any more. And so it was just this point until we really got to a place where we owned it that God was like, no, you don't deserve more. And it wasn't until the end of 2019 that we finally came to the reality of we got to sell our house and start over. So we did. We sold our beautiful home in Frisco and sold all our furniture at pennies on the dollar because none of it would fit in this house that we rent today. And heck, we couldn't even take all of our clothes. We had to share one closet. And it was a much, much smaller house. But we took all that money and we paid it off. And come April of 2020, when the world was shut down with COVID, we had no debt. And the peace that we had was ridiculous. I had forgotten what it was like to have peace because bit by bit, I had built up a life of anxiety with my own choices of spending more than I could, have to panic. I mean, every day I'd go to work thinking, if I work my butt off all day, I'm still not going to get out of debt. It's a hopelessness. But when I removed all that, and by contrast, I could see what I used to live like and what I feel like now, it was remarkable. And so that was the journey that started us understanding what it really means to be accountable. And then we looked at everything in our life. We went to counseling. I started looking at my health and going, gee, the fattest I've ever been. I was 265, so unhealthy. And so I thought, I got to stop all my habits that are making me fat, and lost weight and got back to the gym and started doing things and worked on our relationship. And everything was up for grabs because we had won this one area of our debt that was really strangleholding us. And once we got that confidence that we could do it and we could make a change, it just opened up everything. And it's been a beautiful journey since then.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And the thing that I love about your story, Robert, is right. You're talking about accountability and you're also living it. You're not pretending like you don't have it all together and there's areas to be accountable. And then it's like, hey, don't make excuses. Nobody cares. Make the changes and
not
just
like
do
we're
it.
perfect. We still make mistakes. I'm still to this day struggling with deciding how I want to live my life and doing it. And there's a lot of laziness that's still inside of me. It's my nature. I am a lazy person. You would not know that by watching the way I run my business from the outside because I've had success and I have clients and they don't look at me as lazy. I meet every deadline. I do everything I'm supposed to do. But in my soul, it's like, what's the least amount of work I could do here? And so I have to always challenge myself with the vision of excellence that drives me because I want to represent Christ in the business world. And that makes me less lazy because I do care. I want people to look at me and say, that person is integrity. That person is caring. That person is responsible. And he's doing it under the banner of his faith in Christ. And that's what drives me to be not lazy.
No, absolutely. And it's that, right? A little bit of this is discipline breeds discipline, right? Like as you start being accountable in certain areas of your life, it trickles, right? It trickles
There's a
into
ripple
all these
effect.
other spaces.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We always talk about discipline comes from your purpose. So when you lack discipline, it's because you lack purpose. So when you have a purpose for your life, it creates a vision of where you're going to go, what it's going to look like, and what you're going to do. That vision creates a passion inside of you. And that passion burns. So I got to do this. This is going to be awesome. That passion leads to intentional actions because this is what I need to do to fulfill that passion. And those intentional actions result in discipline. And so when you lack discipline, go back to your purpose. And do you really, really know what your purpose is? I know my purpose. My purpose is to help people remove the obstacles that keep them from being their best. So my job, my focus, my time, my resources, all is held up in the light of my personal purpose. I make decisions against that. And at the very top of the list, our purpose is to honor God in all we do so that other people would come to know Christ through us. And then down below that is we've got a family to take care of and kids to raise. But my personal purpose is very specifically known and I make decisions against it. And to me, that's where the discipline comes from, is that purpose.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a mission, you're kind of aimless, right? You're floating. You don't really know what you exist for.
Yeah.
And that's actually a good segue here into kind of this last section that I wanted to talk to you about. You and I are both kind of involved here in this work in faith space, work in faith movement. And I think that's we're trying to tackle that problem from the standpoint of we're not trying to separate our work from ultimately our larger mission, our larger calling, but that it's actually intricately woven into that. So speak a little bit to kind of your involvement in work in faith and just, where you see this going, what you want to see, kind of come out of that.
Yeah. It's funny that you say it. It's funny you say it that way because you talk about weaving it into our faith. Let me challenge this whole thought. We got to stop taking it out of our day. The thing I see people doing is they push away their faith. You don't need to figure out ways to weave it in. You need to stop pushing it out. And the problem is that we've told ourselves, I can't be a Christ follower at church, at work. Not true. What you can't do or shouldn't do is be a bad version of a Christ follower at church. But you absolutely have the right and the freedom to live out your faith. When you don't live out your faith 5 or 6 days a week, you build this incongruity in your mind and your body. And all that leads to an awkwardness that you carry to work every day. If I had to go to work every day and stop talking about my wife or kids or the Cowboys, I just can't talk about the Cowboys. If you had to say, these are things you're not allowed to talk about, I'm not a whole person. But for some reason, we self-impose things that our own work can't legally tell us to do. But we self-impose this. And so what I want people to do is stop being two people. I had, like I mentioned earlier, my client world where I was a bad guy. This is a word I can't think of. But then it was my church world. And I was leading a Sunday school class and this great example of all this stuff. Just be one person everywhere. And if you're not happy with the person you are, go work on that. That's why every day the Bible tells us to pick up our cross and follow the example Jesus set. A cross is a horrible, painful thing. It's something that you do, you don't want to pick up for fun. It's not a walk through the park. And we forget that life is going to suck. Because until we're with Jesus or until he comes back, we're living in a broken world with fallen people and broken systems and evil. So it's supposed to be hard. And Jesus said, take heart. I've overcome the world. You're going to overcome the world, but it's going to be a bummer. So we have to get our expectations right. So don't go at it with this mindset that I've got to go gear up to be someone else at work. You're suppressing the beauty that is in you. Now, not everyone shares my faith in Christ, and someone listening to this podcast may not be a Christ follower like we are. That's fine. It's not my job to save you. It's my job to live an example of the faith that is in me so people are curious enough to go, tell me more. God will save you. God will decide when and how you get to know him. But it's my job to not keep you away. And so if we could just focus on us being the best version of us and encouraging everyone else to show up at work as a whole person, not leaving some part behind and have to be partial of a person. Because the things of my faith help me make good decisions at work. We're told to be humble and kind and forgiving and gracious and serving. All those things would make me a great employee at your company. It would make me a great leader because I would care about my employees. I would listen to them. I wouldn't be so egotistical that I already know everything. Just go do your job. And so all the things that would make us a great employee, we're pushing it away. Don't push it away. Be one person all the time. And if you're not happy with the person you are, work on that. Get other people in your life who can encourage you and sharpen you and challenge you, but just show up as one person. I think that's the way we need to approach this. Not figure out some interesting thing. I'll bring tracts to work and put them by the coffee pot. That's a joke. Remove the junk from you that is keeping you from being a great example of Christ so that that shines through, and then just be one person ever.
Yeah. Paul says, right, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And we're trying to do the same thing in our workplace. We are saying that, making an example, to the people around us. But you're right, it's exhausting. It is exhausting to be two different people, in different places. Just be you. You can't, even if you try, you really can't sustain that.
No.
It will.
And it's affecting our
sneak
mental
out.
health. We've got a mental health crisis in this country. One of the best solutions for your mental health is to live out your faith at work. Again, I would like for you to know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, but it's not my job to convince you. It's God's job to redeem you. But if you're not the same faith in me, show up with that faith. Bring whatever faith you have, bring it to work, and be whole. Because otherwise you have this internal stress all day. If we just create a world where everyone was respected for where they're at, I think we'd have a different level of peace in the workplace. But I want everyone to take the time to live out their faith through their work, regardless of their faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have much to do in that space, but let me kind of leave with this. So, with more Christians trying to be more active in their workplaces, there's actually been a lot of Christians who are starting to want to open businesses and make an impact through their business. What are some ways in which they can take this desire to do great things through their company and also pair it with this idea of accountability? Where are places that you would see that they should be really careful about in making sure they're being held accountable to certain things to help them in their business?
Yeah. So one of the best ways to be accountable to something is to put it in writing. A lot of times we as business owners, we don't want to tell people what we're going to do because then they're going to ask us, well, how's that going? And if you don't do it, you look stupid. And so in the mindset of trying to have a way to weasel out of it, we just kind of keep it close to our vest. That's why a lot of leaders don't put written goals down, because then they got to do them. Or they got to have people asking about, how come we're doing this instead of that? Don't go back to work. We want the freedom to change our minds a lot. The downside of that is that we're not ever getting to excellence. So if you really want to be your best, put in writing what you want to do, the vision for your company, what do you exist for, what's your mission, and the values. How are we going to treat people? Companies hire me to come in and help them put in writing those three things. And it is shocking to me how many companies don't even have a written document that says, this is what we're going to be someday, this is what we're doing as a focus, and this is the way we're going to get it done. At the very least, not processes and procedures, that's a thing that every department has, but that we all look the same in doing it. Because there are divisions that will be horrible, and an owner who's like, well, we're a great company. Not over there, because we're not sharing a vision that everyone's living up to, and there's no way to measure it. Nobody can hold anyone accountable. You can only create a world where people want to be accountable to themselves. And so if you create a document in writing that they have to compare, this is what I'm supposed to look like, this is what I look like, that doesn't match. And it's easy to figure out where we need to get better. So if we don't put it in writing and we don't share with other people and we don't let them have input into our lives, we're never going to be accountable. And I think that's what a business owner needs to start by doing. Know who you are, know your purpose, know what your company's all about, what goals you want, put them in writing, and then share them with the team. And then surround yourself with people. Heck, you hired these people. You must have thought they were worth something. Why not bring them into a place where they can give more feedback and guidance and support and listen to them? That's the way you can self-accountable yourself. You can have the team give you input and be honest about where we're going. And that will motivate you to do the things you know you're supposed to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's a great practice in business. It's a great practice for the organization as a whole. It's a great practice for every division that you have, right?
Yeah.
That you have a standard and a measurement in how you're going to evaluate yourself, and that it's all funneling into a full company. But this even plays down into our roles in the home. Do you have one for yourself as a father? Do you have one for yourself as a husband. This process can play out really into anywhere that we go.
Yeah. How do you know if you're on track if you don't know where you're going? And if one of the simplest things is your finance. If you don't have a budget, how do you know if you're spending your money wisely? One of the philosophies I teach my clients is this idea of avoiding overload. Well, our world has become overloaded in so many ways. One of the simplest ones, or more relevant, or prevalent, is financial overload. Most of the world lives in debt. It's messed up. And we should not be in debt, because when we put ourselves in debt and God shows up and wants to use some of your money for his glory, he can't, because you already spent it plus some. So you're stiff arming God. I'd love to give to that missions trip right now, but I can't because I have all this debt and I barely get by. You are taking all the blessings God gave you and you're spending it the way you want, which is your freedom, but there's no room for God to come up and say, give some money to that guy. Your neighbor here is really struggling financially. Give them $1,000 to cover their rent. $1,000? I don't have $1,000. What'd you do with all that money I gave you? We need to create room for God to move in our lives, in our time, our money, our health, and our emotions. And there's a book called Margin out there that Richard Swenson wrote. And I teach this principle to my clients. Creating a world without overload requires margin, where God can interrupt your day, your health. Got to stay up late to help a friend who's struggling, and you got to be there to listen to them, encourage them. So it's a late night, you don't get a night's sleep, but you're okay because you had 5 nights of good sleep before. That's creating margin in your health. So when God says, here, go be used this area, you're available for God. So I think it's important that we create a world where God has the freedom to move in our lives by the way we roll.
Yeah, that's great, brother. Well, Robert, I just want to thank you so much for jumping on here with me to go ahead and talk about this. It was awesome to get to know you a little bit better, to hear kind of what you're doing with all these businesses and how you're bringing this accountability principle into the workplace. So if anyone was listening today and they want to reach out to you, they want to hear some more about you, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, our book is able to be purchased on nobodycaresbook.com. Of course, I'm all over LinkedIn. You can find me there. I get out and tell my story a lot. And I really do want to connect with people and encourage them to live out their faith. So if someone's struggling with that, I'd love to talk to them. And then, with the book, if somebody is interested in bringing these principles of accountability to their team, just fill out a contact form saying, we want you to come speak to our team and teach us about accountability. And this is a thing I'd like to do as workshops all around the world, because I really believe accountability is a blessing to the whole community. Parents who pay for their kids and not abandon them, people who are responsible to their families, people who are responsible to the friendships and responsible to the codes that we put in our government. Accountability is a huge principle. I'd love to take it anywhere. So if anyone's looking for a workshop, you can contact me through my website, nobodycaresbook.com.
Awesome. Well, Robert, thank you so much, brother. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today to the Built in Faith podcast. Again, I am your host, David Hemm, and we'll see you next time.